Okay, so welcome back to the part number 2, this about the K2 from Behringer. Now, this is just going to be about the patch bay only. We're going to only talk about this. Now, of course, in order to learn how this works, you need to know perfectly how this part works. Now, I've already made a video. Check on the cards and check on the description. You first make sure that you already know how the synth operates without the patch bay, and then learn the patch bay. Right, so notice that this video is divided into different sections. If you look at the bottom, you have the timeline. Everything is divided in tiny modules. So you can watch maybe one part one day and then maybe come back a different day and then keep watching. Right, so let's just begin. We are going to be talking about the modulation generator and the total. And we could have already talked a little bit about this on the first video. So if you go right here, you're going to find it right here in the patch bay. It says modulation generator. And then notice that we have two outs with the triangle, saw, and the ramp. And then on the other side, we have the pulse. So we're going to talk about this. And again, the total is going to be this one, this patch bay. So we know that maybe if we play something, let me just give you an example. If I go right here to the cutoff, I know that I can use the modulation generator maybe to do something like that. We're going to go to a triangle because that's what we can do, triangle, saw, and a ramp. And I'm going to be going up, not on this one, on the other one, on this one. I'm going to be going up. And of course, we're going to be using that LFO. And this is something that we know that we can do. Right? So by default, it's going to use the triangle, the saw. If I go to the saw, or we're going to be using the ramp. So this is the default behavior. Now, behind the scenes, we can patch this something to the total, and we can replace how this works. So in this case, we're going to start the patching right now. I'm going to go to the modulation generator. So this one will give you two options. You could use either whatever is that you're using right now by default. This is the default pre-wiring, or you can use the pulse. So we go right here. This is going to be the pulse. So whenever we connect something right here, we need to go to some place. And notice it says out. So this means that this is an out. And if it doesn't say anything, it's because it's an in. So if we go right here to the total, I'm going to go and connect it to that one. Now, instead of using a triangle, a saw, or a ramp, we're going to be using a pulse. So if I do some modulation, notice that we get, now let me go up in volume just a little bit. So notice that we get that pulse behavior. Now we can go all the way to the other side, just going to be super short. Or we can go to the other side, and it's going to be a little bit longer, let's say. Right. Now, what's the catch with this one? So when we connect something to the total, and you can see it right here on the description right here at the bottom, the total burns right here, and then it goes all the way almost to the end, and it ends on the filter. You need to follow the line. And every time we go to the oscillator number 1, it's just going to go a little bit up, then goes to the 2, and then goes to the high pass filter, and then goes to the low pass filter. So this means that the total, whenever we patch something right here, is going to be overriding the default behavior of the synth, of the frequency modulation, of the cutoff frequency, and the cutoff frequency of the low pass. So we are overriding whatever we do on the first row of these 3 knobs. So now I'm doing a square on this one, or we are doing a square on this one as well. We're going to need to provide a good example. And then we are doing a square also on the frequency, right? And it's because we are overriding everything. So what happens if I disconnect this, right? And I leave it disconnected. Notice that nothing is moving, and we are doing some movement. And I am doing something right here. I'm telling go and do that LFO. If I go to this one and I move it up, notice that this attenuator now it's doing pretty much nothing, and it's because we are disconnecting it. That's what total means. Total means this, this, and this. Since we are connecting something and we are not providing an instruction, it's doing nothing. Right? So that's how it works. Whatever you connect right there is going to override the behavior of the first 3 knobs. And in this case, could be this, or could be this, or maybe could be a modulation from an external synth like the Crave, for example. And I'm going to use this to give you a few examples in a couple sections. So that's when you go right here at the bottom and you read the description on each kind of attenuator. It says MG, which is a modulation generator, and then it says TXT is going to be total external. So that's it. I'm going to go and disconnect this for now. So whenever you see the total or the T something, it means the total, this total, and it means all the first row, you know, the first 3 attenuators for this one, and this one. Now, and this is good because now you can, of course, change your instruction, change your modulation generator to do, instead of a triangle, to do something else or to do something from an external synth, right? But the problem is that whenever you plug something to total, you're doing the same for all of the 3 attenuators. What if you want to do something right here and then you want to do something different right there, right? Okay, so that's why we get the other ones. Total means kind of everything, but then you get individual kind of a patch points. So you get the frequency is going to be this one. Then right here, we're going to skip this one. We're going to talk about the external signal in a minute. Then if we go to the next one, it says cutoff frequency. Well, this one is going to be this one, the low pass, the high pass. And then this one is going to be the low pass filter. So maybe I can grab something else like an LFO or an envelope or whatever we want, and we can connect it right there instead of total, and we can override the instruction we have only for maybe the high pass or the low pass or the frequency. Okay, so let me just give you an example. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to do the pulse and I'm going to go to the frequency of the oscillators. And this one will be frequency of both oscillators. So if we think about this, we kind of assume that we are going to be doing kind of a frequency modulation with a pulse by doing, following this speed or this rate, and we're going to do it right here. Now we are already kind of patched right there, and we are doing it with this modulation. So if I play something, now let me just do a little bit more of this. I'm going to be going up. Right now we are on either a triangle or we are in a square. If I go up, we are doing a modulation, but this doesn't sound like a square. It sounds like a triangle. It's going like that. It's not up or down. And if I go down on this one, we already know that this one is connected to the envelope generator. But now if I go up on that one, I'm getting my square modulation. So this is what we patched right here. All right, so what is the catch? So the catch is that whenever you connect something right here, that you're not going to the total and you're just going to here or either here, you're not disconnecting the modulation from the first row. You're disconnecting the behavior for the second row, the second knobs. So in the case of frequency, it's going to be this one. So now this one is not responsive to the envelope generator 1 anymore. It's responsive to external. And external is this. All right, so let's do the same example. In this case, I'm going to go and maybe patch it to the cutoff frequency. Going to be a very simple example. I'm going to go play something. And if I keep going up, this one, remember, it listens to the envelope generator. This listens to the envelope, but not anymore. Now it's listening to the square. And we are getting that, all up, all down kind of a behavior. Right. Of course, now what we can do, since we can use this right here, we maybe can do a little bit of modulation with the triangle, and we are using both at the same time. We are using the square and we are using right here the triangle on the cutoff frequency. Of course, sounds weird, but we can. Right, I'm gonna go down on the cutoff frequency, and now we are doing just the square. Now remember, when we plug in something right here, we are disconnecting the second attenuator, right? The second pre-wired behavior. But the first one is still connected to the LFO. Now what is going to be doing? Because right now we are doing an LFO, and it's the square LFO. But what we can do in this case, when we do something like this, we can use either the square LFO that we are connecting to this, and right here we still get the default behavior. And notice that we get the triangle. So yeah, so right here we get a triangle, and right here we have a square. So what we can do, we can do a combination of both. And now you have a square mixed with a triangle. Now, of course, you get the same thing right here for the cutoff frequency. You can do pretty much the same thing. It's just the same idea. Now, I don't know if you notice, and I know if you are trying to learn the MS20 or the K2 in this case, and you look at the main panel and you say, how confusing is all this? It is. It's not just you. It is confusing. This was invented, this one was released on the 70s. So, the panel is not so easy to read. So it's not just you, it is confusing. But as soon as we move on through each different section, the sections, all of this is just going to start making sense. It's going to be a lot easier to read. And I don't know if you just noticed, but we just covered 6 patch points already. We covered total, we know what that is, this one, the cutoff, this one, and then we covered this one. So there you go. We have a lot of patch points. And notice that we don't have a million patch points. So it's going to get easier and easier every time that we advance to the next section. Okay, so let's go to the next one. We need to talk about noise. Right, so by default, you can use noise as your main or one OSC. And you get it right here. I can go to maybe OSC 1, go all the way down on the OSC 2, and we get noise. Now, the thing is that it's just a waste. It's just a waste. You're using an oscillator just to get noise. Now, right here at the bottom, and for now I'm going to bring all. Right here at the bottom, you get a section that says noise generator, and it gives you a pink noise, which is a variation of noise, and then you get the classic white noise. So what you can do, instead of using the noise from the oscillator, you just can connect whatever it is that you want and use it on your signal. In this case, I'm going to be using white noise. It's going to be a little bit annoying, but that's fine. And right now, this one contains the noise. Where can we plug it in? If we go all the way right here to the signal chain, we know what this means. And then we get external signal in. And right here, if you look at the description or the drawing or whatever is that signal path, we know that we have the mixer of the VCO, which is the oscillators. And then, this signal is kind of a blending into the filters. So whatever we plug right here, whatever external sound or signal we put right here, at the end of the day, it's going to go through the filters with the oscillators. So now we are not wasting the oscillator number 1 with noise. We have a noise signal and it's being blended with the oscillator 1 and 2. So if I play something, notice that we hear, of course, the oscillator. It's in the background. We have a tiny problem right now with volume. We're going to fix it in a second. But we get it. We get the oscillator number 1, the 2, and the noise. Now, of course, you can use pink noise. It's going to be a little bit less annoying for this example. Or maybe not that less annoying. But yeah, that's how it works. You could use noise to, of course, use it for whatever you want, and we will use it for different purposes. But in this case, we can go to the external signal in and put it on the chain right there. Now, the main problem right now is that the noise is way too loud. If I play something, it's just killing my whole sound. We can listen right here just to the noise. If I go all the way down on the oscillators, notice I'm getting the noise, just the noise, and it's because, of course, we are not going through the mixer. Right. So if we are not going through the mixer, it means that we cannot control the volume, right? And that is our main problem. But we can really control the volume. We can control this signal a little bit more. If you read all the way down, and for now I'm gonna maybe disconnect it. If you go all the way down, it says external signal processor. So we can go maybe here, process the signal, maybe lower the volume, shape it a little bit, and then come back to the external signal in so we can have a better blend. Okay, so let's talk about the EXT, the external signal processor. This is something that you don't get on a lot of synthesizers, and this has different parts. This could be 4 different things. It could be a filter or volume control. That's one thing. It could be an ENV Follower. You notice that you get the ENV Follower right here, so it could be 2 things. It could be an audio to voltage converter. So you have 3 things. It's going to be this one, signal to voltage. And then it could be a trigger. So you have 4 things. So this one, it's the trigger out. So now for the example with the noise that we did previously, What we care is about controlling how the volume goes into the external signal and how we can kind of shape it a little bit. So, okay, so sorry for that, just bumped the microphone. What I want to do, I want to grab my noise, right? This is my noise. And I want to process it somehow so this signal goes into the EXT. So then this one, if you follow right here, is going to go through an amp section that is the volume that we have right here, right? We could adjust the volume. And notice that sometimes when you go super high on the level, it's just going to tell you, dude, you're peaking. This is important later when we talk about this, but for now, not so much. So we're going to go, we get the noise, it goes to the EXT, and then it goes through an amp. We can manage the volumes. Then it's going to go to the next section. And notice that this kind of breaks right here, and it goes to the envelope follower. We will talk about the envelope follower much later. We're just going to talk about this. And when we reach the different sections where we need to talk about the converter or maybe the follower, we are just going to be using a different example. For now, I'm just going to be talking about this one, and this one. Okay, so of course the signal goes in and it's going to go through a band pass. Now the first out that you get right there is going to be the volume, not the band pass, not the filter. So if I patch something right here and we go to the external signal in, and remember I'm doing nothing of the oscillators, we are just listening to the noise. I play something and we hear the noise. Now if I go up, this is going to get louder, and notice it's kind of a super clipped. Now if I go right here at the bottom, we are just getting less volume. At the end of the day, we can just bring our oscillators and make just a better blend of the noise. That's why we get the EXT. Right. So, that's the first use. And right now we are going out of the amp. So we are just controlling volume. Now, right now, I just want to hear what we do with the noise. And you're going to need to take a look at the spectrum. So if I unplug it from here, disconnect it from there, and I go to the next one, to the next patch point, is not going to be the FV converter. This is going to be the filter out. So I'm going to go right there. So now what we are doing, we are going through the signal. It goes through the amp, which is the volume, and we are cutting frequencies. Notice that it sounds a little bit different already. So if I do this and go up, notice it's cutting low frequencies. And if I go to the other one, I'm going to be going up and we are cutting high frequencies, right? So we just have a filter. We are just cutting lows and cutting highs. So now, of course, the sound is going to be a little bit different because we can manage it a little bit more. Maybe I can cut the highs and maybe I can cut a little bit of lows. There we go. Right, so that's why we get the external, signal, the EXT, the EXP, sorry, the external signal processor. Now you can do a lot of things. You can even go maybe patch a different oscillator, maybe a different sound that you have from a different synthesizer, and then process and then go in to the external signal in, or maybe just go directly from a different synth like the Crave I have right here. Right, so we are going to be talking about the next ones in a couple of sections when we get to that point where we know a little bit more about how the synth works in terms of voltage and in terms of triggering, because we need to learn a couple of things that are very particular with this synthesizer, the triggers and how it will kind of use this CV voltage and for the oscillators and everything else. But we are going to be talking about this later. And when we get to that section, we are going to be talking about how the rest of the patch points we have right here work. So we need to talk about this one, the envelope generator 1. And we already know what this one does. It's going to be this one, this envelope generator. So now right here, you get kind of this section on the patch bay where you can just, get something out of this and do some other different things. So if you take a look and you look at the kind of the drawing, this one, it will go right here to the frequency, and this is what it does by default. Remember, if I play something and I go up on this one, whatever we do right here, it's going to be modulating the pitch of the oscillator 1 and 2. Right? So that's why it does by default. If we follow the chart, it's going to go right there, and then it goes to the 1 and 2. We know. But then, if you go right there, it's going to give you an out, which is the same thing that we are doing, but you can patch it to some other places. Then you have a rev out, which is the kind of the revert the reverse version of the same envelope. And if you keep going down, you have something that says VCA. And the VCA has three different things: an input control, an in and an out. So we're going to be covering this part. But first, we're going to start easy with the envelope generator out and the rev out. Okay, so we know that, again, we are going to be doing some modulation with this envelope, but this only happens on the frequency of the oscillators, on this second attenuator of the first attenuator of the second row. But right here, the envelope that it will control the cutoff, or the cutoff of the high pass and the low pass, is going to be the envelope generator number 2, not the 1, right? So, right here you get the out, and we know that we can overwrite whatever it is that we are doing. So if we want to overwrite the total, you can go right there, and now this row and this one, and pretty much everything right here, will be responsive not to the envelope generator or LFO. It's going to be responsive to this. So if I do something like that, I'm getting that modulation. So if I go to this one right here, and maybe do a little bit of that, notice that we are getting it. Takes a little bit because we are doing delay, and then it goes down. So yeah, we can override the default kind of a behavior of the total. But if you think about this, I'm disconnecting the LFO from the first row, so maybe I don't want to do that. But this one's the high pass and the low pass are using the EG2, and we know that this is the same thing that the amp is using. So sometimes it's just a little bit annoying to use the same thing. So what we could do, we could use the envelope follower 1, and maybe I can say, okay, so but for the cutoff frequency, I'm going to be using the envelope generator 1 instead of the 2. So this will be responsive to this one and not this one. Right? Of course, let me just do a little bit more. It's very slow, of course, kind of on purpose. Let me just do it like that. Let me just do it like that. And if we want a delay, we get the delay. So pretty simple, pretty simple to do. We're just getting the out of the envelope generator, and we're just connecting it where we want to. So then we have the rev out. So this is pretty much the same idea, but it's inverting the envelope. So instead of going and getting this instruction, we are just kind of doing it in reverse. We are using the reverse instruction. This is what the rev out means. And it's something very kind of sorry for that. It's something kind of a common on a lot of synthesizers to invert the envelope. So for now, I'm just going to be going to the cutoff frequencies. We're going to see what's going on with that. I'm going to do a little bit of resonance of release time, so we can hear what is going on right there. I'm going to do a little bit of that. Maybe I'm going to go there, and I'm going to do no delay. So now, I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to do a little bit of peak so we can hear that movement. And I'm going to go all the way in on the modulation, because this is what we are doing at the end. We are providing the reversed envelope to the cutoff frequency. Now I'm going to be playing a key, and notice that it sounds a little bit different. If I release it, we are going to go back and we get a different sound. It's just a little bit different. If I use this one, it's just going to sound completely different. Right? This sounds a little bit more kind of a usual, more common. But this one is going the other way. As soon as I press something or play a key, it's going from here, and what it's doing behind the scenes is going from here. Now it's kind of a reversed. It's starting up, it's going down, and when I release the keys, it's going back to its original position. Right? So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to play. Starts up, goes down, goes all the way right here, and when I release it, it's going to go back. That's why we get the reverse. It's just a different type of sound, different type of envelope. So let me unplug everything right here. So the next thing is going to be this one. And this one is very related to the envelope generator. And for now, I'm going to make sure I go back to the default patch that we always have. I'm going to go there and just going to go all the way up on the filter and no peak. Right, so we get just the default sound. So let's move on to the next topic and talk about the VCA. Okay, so we have the VCA right here, and we have kind of three main patch points is going to be the input control. That's going to be an in. Then we have the in and we have the out. So the VCA means voltage control amplifier, and if we're trying to find the same keyword, we have it right here, which is where how the when the volume or where the sound goes out of the synth. And remember, we have an envelope to control how the sound goes out. So on the envelope generator 1, we have the same thing. We have a way to use this VCA. That's why we get the ins and outs right here, and we can manage the intensity of a volume of something with the envelope generator. Now, what we can do, we can kind of use it on a different way. So, okay, so let's build an example with this. Let's say that we want to we have some instruction and we want to control it with an envelope, or we want to control it somehow. Okay, so notice that you have an in. So whatever you want to control, whatever source you have is going to be going to that in. Of course, if you want to modulate something at some point, you're going to need to go out to someplace else. That's why you have the out. This out means going to be maybe an LFO or whatever that you're using, and it's going to go to a different place. But in the middle, in between, you're going to be processing this signal somehow. So that's going to be the input control. So the input control is whatever is that you're going to use to process the signal. Okay, so let's try to build an example so we can really hear how this works. Right, so I'm going to go to my square LFO, right? And we know that is a square or a pulse, and I want to do some modulation, and I want to do it to the cutoff, right? Something very simple that we've been doing so far. We did it a lot. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of peak so we can really hear what we get. So it's a pulse, and we can go faster, we can go slower, we know that. But the thing is that I just don't want this. I just want to control it a little bit better. Okay, so instead of going directly to the cutoff, I'm going to go through the VCA in, right? So the LFO will go through the VCA, and at some point, the same instruction needs to go out somewhere. So I'm going to be going out, and what we want to do at the end of the day, I want to still do the cutoff frequency. So if I play something, notice that we get the same thing pretty much. Make sure that all of this is down. So pretty much I'm getting the same instruction. I'm not kind of shaping it in a different way. That's why you get the input control. So you can use an instruction to shape whatever sound that it's going in and then comes out, and you shape it in between, So if you think about this, what can you use? Well, you can use whatever you want. You could use a different synth like this one to do a different envelope. Or maybe you can use the same envelope that you're using right here. And in this case, we have the envelope generator. This is the out. I'm going to be plugging in right here. And we need to provide the input control. Who is going to be doing this kind of the heavy lifting or of shaping that waveform? And I'm going to be saying, okay, so my envelope generator 1 is going to be the one changing that LFO. Okay, so now if I do the same example, and I'm going to go a little bit aggressive so we can really hear the difference. And now this one is going to be shaping the LFO. If I do something and I don't use anything, we kind of get the same thing. You're not doing anything right now. But maybe I want to do a little bit of release, and I'm going to add a little release right here. I'm going to do a little bit of attack, and I want to delay. So every time I play a key, the LFO will not start instantly. The envelope is just going to delay the beginning of the LFO, and then it will kind of slowly introduce the square LFO. And then, of course, it's going to sustain until we release it somehow. And for now, I'm just going to leave it there. So now if I play a key, notice it takes a little bit of time, and then it's kind of ramping up. And when we release the key, it's ramping down. Let me just do it again. Right? It's kind of slow. This takes a little bit of time, slowly goes up. And now I'm going to be releasing the key, and it slowly goes down. So what we are doing, we are shaping the LFO with the envelope. That's pretty much what we are doing. Now you could use whatever instruction you want for this. Maybe you want to use it with noise, right? And get some cool sound out of the noise. So I'm going to disconnect this one, which is going to be that this is going to be the instruction. And instead of using an LFO, in this case, what I'm going to be using, it's maybe, white noise. Why not? I'm going to go to white noise. Now the out, instead of going to the cutoff frequency, I'm going to use the external signal in. So we are going to be kind of using the same idea we did before. We are going through the noise and then going right there. Now, if I go all the way down, we can hear what the noise is doing. And there we go. And it's kind of pretty clear. I'm going to be playing again. Slowly goes up. Takes a little bit of time because we have a delay. And when I release the keys, it's just going down. And we could use the same thing, maybe use the pink noise instead of the white noise. Let me just do the patch. And when I release it, it just dies. Now, at the end of the day, you can make as much connections as you want. And in each section, we kind of learn something new. So now we can, use an envelope and go through the VCA. But still, you can go and use the noise generator. And maybe I'm going to go to the white. And I'm going to be going to the external signal in. And we are going to be processing this somehow just to shape it a little bit more. And then we're going to kind of do the band pass. We can cut the lows, cut the highs, and then at the end of the day, we could still go to the in right here and process it with the envelope. So now notice that we have a lot of connections. And if I do it again, we have less volume. It's not super loud, and we are doing a little bit of cutting at the same time. And if I bring the oscillators, now we're going to blend the both. Maybe it's too loud. Right. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you one thing that you need to remember. Now, we did this example, and I told you that whatever we connect to the input control is going to be kind of a shaping whatever is that we do when we go in and we go out. And I did this just to show you that the input control is the one kind of doing the shaping. But behind the scenes, the envelope generator one, this one, it's already pre-wired to shape whatever that happens on the VCA. So the red one, we don't need it. It's kind of already doing that by default. And I kind of tricked you right there. So, right by default, it's using the envelope generator. But this doesn't mean that you cannot use a different instruction to shape whatever is that you're doing right here with input control. And if I kind of go down in volume, we can hear, remember we are using the white noise. Takes a little bit of time, goes up, and if I release the keys, it's going to slowly go up. So we are doing that. We are still using the envelope. I press the key, it's going to take a little while, then goes up, and then when I release it, we have some release time. So yeah, it's still working behind the scenes. It's kind of a pre-wire to that VCA. So we don't need to patch it if you're using the out, right? Which is the default behavior. But maybe you want to do something else, and without going any further, I'm going to bring the rev out, and I'm going to use the reversed information of that envelope. And in that case, you're going to need to patch it because it's not the default behavior of the envelope generator one. So if I do something right now, notice it's going to start very loud, and then it's going to go down. And when I release it, then we go to the release stage. So yeah, well, with this one, you can do a lot of things. In this case, by default, we get the envelope generator one, or you can do the rev out if you plug it in. And I'm going to go to a simple example because I want to show you something else. Let me just disconnect everything and kind of start over. I'm going to make sure that we have nothing right there. I'm going to do no modulation, and for now I'm just going to be doing the classic sound. And now I'm getting that. Let me just go up in volume. And we are doing a lot of release, and go down in this one, go down in this one. Right, so we just wanted kind of the default sound. Oh, and I'm doing peak. I'm gonna go there. Right, so we just want the default sound. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to show you that with this input control, we can do a lot more. For example, if you think about this, we are controlling how something gets shaped with the input control. So we could use an external source, like for example, a knob. Let's say that you have a knob like this one. The synthesizer has something that calls VC mix. So it could be outputting an instruction, and when you go up, you're going to be using it like a mod wheel. Or maybe you can even plug the mod wheel right here and control whatever it is that you're doing. So that's, that's what we can do right now. I'm going to be using the out of this one, which is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be the triangle. This is what we are using by default. But in this case, I'm going to go to the in, and I want to control how that modulation will happen on the cutoff. So in this case, we are going in, and I'm going to be going out to the cutoff frequencies, right? So we know how this works. I'm kind of overriding the second one. So if I go right there, apply a little bit of peak, and I do the modulation, we get that. Now, in this case, to control how aggressive the modulation is, we need to use the attenuator. So we can go down in the, in the modulation, or we can go up, but we need to kind of do it from here. Makes sense. Right. So what if we could control it with the mod wheel? Well, we can. Right, so in my case, I'm using a key step. And now on the key step from, for Arturia, and you get the same thing on the swing from Behringer. I'm going to give it a try to that one in a few days, maybe. But you have 3 different outs at the back of the key with the MIDI keyboard. You have the gate, you have an out for the key, the mouse, I always say mouse wheel, the mod wheel, and then you have an out for the pitch. So if I plug a cable to the out of the mod wheel, I could control that modulation with my mod wheel. So the purple one, this cable, is going to be my mod wheel. So now if I play something, notice it sounds a little bit different. And we are going all the way up right here. So we are telling it to do a modulation, but it's not doing it. But now I'm going to go and move my mod wheel, and it's doing it. And it's because I'm controlling it with my mod wheel. In this case, you're letting it, pass or not pass. I'm going to go up and down on the mod wheel. Up and down on the mod wheel. Right, so in this case, it depends on what you have. This could be whatever attenuator you have. Maybe you have a different module that that has attenuators. Well, you're going to be controlling your attenuator right there and control how much you're going to be doing. Okay, so now we need to talk about the sample and hold, and the section is going to be right here, sample and hold. Now, this is more like a track and hold than sample and hold, and there's some discussion right there. Some people say that it's kind of the same thing, and blah blah, and so on and so on. I'm not going to get in, not going to enter into that, but they work in a different way. In this case, it says sample and hold. But I'm going to be showing you how this works, because maybe you just have no idea what sample and hold means. And it's something very common. It's something very common that you get in a lot of synthesizers. But maybe, again, you have no idea. So I'm going to be showing you how this works. And I'm going to be taking you the DAW so I can give you a more visual information of how we can build and how sample and hold works behind the scenes. And once you know that, you know how it works, I'm going to be back. I'm going to going back right here so we can use it on this synthesizer. Okay, so a sample and hold, it's usually associated with modulation, and we associate it with noise by default to generate a random kind of instruction. Now, you could use it. You could use something else than noise to generate something more predictable. We have different ways of using this. So to use a sample hold, you kind of need 3 different parts. The signal, where we're going to be taking snapshots, and it's about taking snapshots, and it could be whatever noise or whatever other noise. In this case, we're going to use the usual kind of a way of working with sample and hold. I'm going to bring a noise module. So this one will be, giving me some noise. And I'm going to be bringing a display so we can see that this is noise, and we can confirm that this is noise. And notice that how it looks. You can do pink and you can do white noise in this case. So yeah, it's just noise, So we need to use a source like noise, because noise is a very unpredictable kind of a sound source. And we're going to be taking snapshots from this unpredictable sound source to generate this random kind of instruction. That's how the sample and hold works. So I'm going to go to right here's level, and I'm going to bring us a module that says sample and hold. Okay, so right now the sample hold needs 3 parts, and we can see them right here. We need this source, which in our case is going to be a noise, and then of course this is going to be processed and it will come out somehow. I'm going to grab the display, and we are going to be watching whatever comes out of the sample and hold. And I'm going to connect it right here. So notice that we get nothing. We get pretty much nothing. We get a straight line. And it's because we are doing some processing, but we have a missing part. So this is going to be what is going to be triggering the sample and hold. Now, the sample and hold, what it does behind the scenes is going to take a snapshot from the source. Could be a predictable source or an unpredictable source. In this case, noise is unpredictable. And it will go right here and it will take a snapshot of some point in time of the incoming signal. So since this is unpredictable, that snapshot could be, maybe on a one position, or maybe it's going to be on a different position, because again, it's just unpredictable. So we're going to be taking snapshots. Now, the thing is that now we have the place where we're going to be taking snapshots, and then we are just seeing or outputting the snapshot or the main result that we get. Now, we need something that is going to be deciding how or when we are going to be taking the snapshots. And this is the missing link, the missing part. So what we need a gate, we need a clock, or even use an LFO. But we need something that is going to be triggering the sample and hold and saying, take the snapshot now, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this could be a clock. So I'm going to go right here to the LFO, and we have a section that calls clock. And this is just a clock. It's going to be triggering something, and it's going to go on a certain speed. And I'm going to connect it right here. Now, this is going very slow, but we can see that it's going up and it's going down. We could just almost not predict this. Actually, we cannot predict this. Now, if I go fast, it's going to be a little bit more visual. And we can see that the sample and hold, what it outputs at the end, is going to be an instruction. This is going to be +1, and this is going to be -0. So at the end of the day, if we connect this to someplace else, it's going to be saying go up, go down, go up and down, up and down. And notice that we cannot predict this because, again, noise is an unpredictable sound source. So remember, we have three parts: the what we are going to be using to do the sample and hold, the how long, how are we going to be triggering to generate each snapshot, and then the instruction that will come out that we can use in someplace else. And in this case, we can use this to provide a random instruction to do something on a synthesizer, like the K2. For example, in the case of Bitwig right here, I just can bring whatever we want. Maybe I'm going to bring some oscillator. I'm going to bring a filter. Then I'm going to patch an envelope. And then the sound will come out somehow. So it's going to be maybe a little bit loud. Let me just go right here at the bottom. And I'm going to be going down in volume. So if I play something, it's going to be audio out. So if I play something, notice that we can hear the sound coming out. Now I'm going to be making this kind of a saw, and I'm going to do some filtering, something like that. All right. So in this case, I'm going to be bringing something that will listen to this modulation. And at the end of the day, we can just maybe go right here and say, okay, I want you to go up and down in this fashion. So if I play a key, we are going to be getting a random modulation. We could do the same thing with the pitch. And then we are using the sample and hold to do the classic kind of a thing, which is modulating the pitch or some other thing. But now you know all the parts. So we have an unpredictable source. Then we have something that is going to be triggering the sample and hold to take this snapshot. And then we go out to do the modulation. Okay, so now then you know how sample and hold works because you watched the previous section. If you have no idea how sample and hold works, you're going to need to watch it. We're going to do it on this synthesizer. So notice that we have an in that's going to be our sound source, the unpredictable or predictable sound source. Then we have the out, which is going to be where we're going to be doing that modulation. And then we have the clock, what it's going to be deciding when or how, in this case, since this is more track and hold, how and when we are going to be taking the snapshot to get something out of the out. Okay, so remember, we need a sound source. We need to do something. So in this case, we could use the classic kind of a white noise, and we are going to be going into the sample and hold. At some point, we are going to use it as a modulation source. So this is going to go out somewhere. And in this case, I'm going to use the cutoff that we have right here. So far, we have nothing right here. We just have the usual kind of sound that we always get. I'm going to go down this one just in case. So yeah, we just get the usual kind of a default sound that we've been using. So now, of course, we are using an unpredictable sound source going to the sample and hold, and we are going out, but we are not doing anything to this control. Now, of course, since we are patching into the cutoff filter to the low pass, if we go up, we should be getting something. And in this case, We are not getting anything, right? Okay. So now what do we need to do? We're gonna need to decide which one is going to be the clock. You know, when or how fast or how we're gonna be taking the snapshots. And we don't have a visual clock right here. We don't have a clock on this synthesizer that we can use. But we do have the modulation generator. You know, we have the pulse, and this one can be used as the clock. So I'm going to be patching out of the sound source of the clock, in this case the the pulse, and I'm going to use it as a clock. And there we go. So now, of course, we are modulating the low pass filter, and I'm going to be going all the way down, and I'm going to go up because we want to hear some kind of modulation. And notice that we kind of get it. Let me do something like that. And notice that we do get something random. But we are also getting part of the noise. So we get both. And this works more like a track and hold. Now, the problem right now is that, of course, we are using the pulse as a sound source, as a trigger. So right now, it's kind of a little bit too wide. If you go to the other side, we are going to be getting something more useful. You know, the noise is not that present anymore. And now we get, what we wanted, a random instruction to do some kind of a modulation. Right. Now, of course, if you go the other way, you're going to get the noise. And on this way, you're going to get more noise than just modulation. Right. So cool, no? That's how the sample and hold works. Right, so of course we could do something else. Instead of going to the cutoff, we are going to be using the most common example, which is going to be modulating the frequency. So this one is going to go up and down and get a random modulation of the frequency. It's going to go up and down. And of course, if we change the rate, you're going to get that kind of a computer sound. I want to say computer sound, but yeah, kind of like that. So we could use pink noise instead of using white noise. It's going to be a little bit more precise if we wanted to create this effect. That is, it sounds a little bit better, more precise. If I go to the cutoff frequency, again, it's just going to be a little bit better. Let me just connect it right there. It just sounds a little bit different. Right. So right now we are using the sample and hold to kind of use it in a more conventional way, just with noise. But maybe you could use a different LFO, just like we did on the previous section, and use maybe a different waveform and get something more predictable out of that. So right now we are using this as a clock. We are using the the pulse LFO as a clock, and that's not bad. Now what you could do is use something else as a clock. But we have a tiny problem. Notice that it says GND right there at the bottom. Maybe if I disconnect this, you're going to be able to see it. It says GND, and I'm talking about this one right here, GND. So we're going to be talking about this in a second, and it's kind of the weird parts of the MS20 and the K2 as well. So in this case, since we are going to be using a pulse as a clock, we could use something else as a clock. Now, if you think what a clock is, it's just going to be like a trigger. It's going to say to the sample and hold, take a snapshot, take it, and it's going to follow a certain speed, right? But essentially, it's just giving an instruction of when it needs to kind of a trigger to get that snapshot. So if you go right here, you can see something that says Trig SW out. So instead of just using an LFO to trigger the clock and, get that snapshot, we can use it manually. Notice that you get a button right here. So every time that you press it, it's going to be triggering the sample and hold and kind of telling the sample and hold, dude, take that snapshot. But instead of using an LFO or something more control like that, we're going to be doing it with the button. So now if I play something, notice that we get nothing on this and we are doing this modulation. Now, if I start playing around with this, maybe it's going to be a little bit more obvious on the frequencies. So if I go right there and just maybe go all the way down and do a little bit of modulation right there, notice what we get. Now, of course, it's going really crazy, but now, because we are using the noise, now I'm going to be tapping this button. And of course, I'm not as fast as the LFO and precise as the LFO, but in this case, you're triggering the clock with this button, right? Okay, so we can do that, but the whole point is right now is this funny keyword, GND, GND, and then GND. So this is the topic of the next section. So you must be thinking, okay, so every time that we play a key, in this case, or the button, this one, what it's doing, it's triggering like a gate, right? We're telling it the clock to open and close when we just press or tap the button. Or maybe when we play a keyboard, you know, when we use the envelope and we play a key, my keyboard is going to tell, okay, synthesizer open, let the sound pass, let the envelope generator do its job. And it's kind of a triggering the synthesizer by MIDI, because I'm using MIDI. And yeah, it's essentially what's going on, right? And this is, you know, how synthesizers work. They have a gate, or we have a trigger to provide an instruction of how this should let the sound pass. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. Now, in the case of this one, of this synthesizer and the MS20 as well, the problem is that this was released on the 1970A, so this is using a different standard that we use today. And this synthesizer uses something called S triggers, or S trigger, instead of the standard that we have today, like the Crave, for example, which is going to be called V triggers. And there's a difference between S triggers and V triggers. This is an S trigger. So if you're using a synthesizer that uses, like this one, that uses V triggers, we cannot really connect it to something that needs to listen, or it's listening to S triggers. You're going to get some kind of a disconnection. It's not going to work that well. So instead of just showing you or just telling you how S triggers and V triggers work, I'm just going to show you how they look and how they work behind the scenes. Because, you know, you can find this information on the web, or you can find this information anywhere of someone telling you how it works, but maybe not getting a kind of a visual representation. So right now, we're just going to get a visual representation. I'm going to build something so you can see how this works. So remember that we are going to be, in this case, talking about how we can trigger an envelope, and it's the S trigger versus the V trigger. Now, the V trigger is what we have today as a standard. Most of synthesizers are going to be using V triggers instead of S triggers. So, okay, in this case, I'm going to build the example. We have an AD, for example. It's going to be an attack and decay, you know, just kind of like a pluck, for example. And in the other case, we are going to be triggering this somehow. We need something to trigger. Now, of course, in our case, could be the keyboard of our MIDI keyboard in our case, or some other synthesizer that is going to be doing the trigger. For example, the Crave that I'm going to be using in a few seconds. So, okay, so I need to trigger this envelope somehow. So I'm going to go to the module, and I'm going to bring something that calls triggers. So this is what we'll do. It will trigger by a number, by an amount. And in this case, it's going to be 4 triggers on each cycle. But that doesn't matter. If I connect it right here, it's going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and the cycle starts over and over again. If I disconnect this and I play a key, this is going to be playing every time I play a key. And notice that I'm kind of playing that key. In this case, I just want to do it this way. Let's say that we have an external synthesizer connected to our K2, trying to trigger that envelope, right? Okay, so this one, it's using V triggers. And I'm going to be showing you how a V trigger looks like. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to bring the oscilloscope, and I'm going to be connecting this one right there. Maybe I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to make it slow so we can see what's going on. So the trigger in this case, it looks like a gate, and it's kind of a gate. It's just a bit kind of a wider, but we can see that it starts on the 0 line and then goes up to +1 in this case. And some synthesizers, depends on how they work, is going to be +5 in terms of voltage. In this case, the only thing that we need to know is that it's going up, right? From 0, nothing, and then up, and then starts over again. And every time that this happens, it's going to be triggering the envelope. That's how V triggers work. So then, how an S trigger is going to work. So the S trigger, instead of having this, is going to need the opposite. This needs to go down in order to trigger. So if I have to bring something just to show you, I'm going to bring this module. This is a shaper, has nothing to do with triggers, But with this one, what we can do, we can invert the instruction of what we are doing right now. So what I can do, I just can do something like this and go the opposite way. And notice that now it's going to go the other way. So this is what our K2 needs to have and needs to use, is an S trigger. By default, we have the other way. That's why it's not going to be responsive to whatever else or other synthesizer we connect to trigger the envelopes, because most of the other synthesizers will use V triggers. So in this case, we need something like this. Remember, the S trigger is going to look go to the negative. Look, it's going to look this way, and the V trigger is going to be the other way. Now, today's standards, it's V triggers, not S trigger. All right, so let's go to the K2 and see how it works on the K2. Okay, so now that you know how an S trigger and a V trigger looks like, we're gonna kind of try to understand how this works behind the scenes a little bit more. And I'm gonna need to do a little bit more explaining because this is a family show, and I'm kind of targeting all audiences, because maybe you're starting on synthesis and some things are not very clear. And I'm going to tell you this because I always get the same question. This question is a very common question. How the signal flow goes right here is that the oscillators that we have right here will emit a constant sound. And this is happening behind the scenes. So then it goes to the mixer. We know that we are going to be doing some filtering. We know that. And then at some point, the sound needs to go out. Now, this envelope, again, is going to control how the sound goes out. Now, if I play a key, there's something on the synthesizer. The synthesizer is listening to something to decide when to let the sound pass or not. Now, in this case, it's going to be a gate. If I play a key, and I'm going to play it right now, this is going to tell the synthesizer, okay, open the gate and let the sound pass. And as soon as I release the key, the sound is going to die. Because behind the scenes, the oscillators are always running. This is not like a guitar, and it's not like a piano. For example, in a guitar, you pluck a string, the string is going to start vibrating, right? And when it stops vibrating, the sound dies. In this case, we don't have that. The oscillators are always emitting a constant sound. What is going to be deciding how the volume goes up and down and how, what we listen to, what we listen, is going to be the gate that we trigger when we play a key, and it's going to be the envelope. So now we are going to be talking about gates and triggers, and it's because, remember that we need to talk about this, the trigger in, and all of that. So I'm going somewhere. So when I play a key, we are telling the synthesizer, and we are, especially this envelope, we are telling it, dude, I want you to start doing your job. I play a key on my MIDI keyboard because I'm using MIDI. The envelope is going to start doing its job. And the job of the envelope is going to be shaping how the sound goes out. So if we do an attack, it's going to slowly do that, and so on and so on. We already have talked about how an envelope works. But the other part is the trigger, is the gate. My MIDI keyboard is telling the envelope, start doing your job. And as soon as I release a key, the job of the envelope is to stop doing its job. And of course, we could have some release, so it's going to slowly go down. But at the end of the day, the gate, my gate, the one I'm using with my MIDI keyboard, it's telling the envelope how to open and how to close. So this is how it works behind the scenes on a synthesizer. We have triggers and we have gates. They're just a little bit different. And in the case of this synthesizer, it's just a little bit weird, but the gates and triggers are a little bit different. A trigger is just an instruction that starts and ends right away. And a gate is more like, it has a sustain stage. I can, play a key, and if I'm holding a key, the gate's going to sustain, and as soon as I release it, it's going to die, and it's going to go back to nothing. And I'm telling you all of this because now all of this is just relevant right here. Now, notice that you get a trigger in right here. So this trigger in is the trigger of the envelope generator number 2. When now I play a key on my MIDI keyboard, it's telling open the envelope, open the gate, let the sound pass, do your job, and when I release it, stop doing your job. So, of course, if we patch something right here, we are telling the synthesizer, bro, I don't want to use the MIDI keyboard as an instruction, as a gate anymore. I'm going to be using whatever I patch right here, right? So this is going to be my open and close gate for the envelope. So now if I play a key, is not listening to my MIDI keyboard anymore because it's expecting a gate instruction or a trigger instruction from this one, from this control. So of course the envelope is not opening and it's not closing. So remember, we have a trigger right here, the trigger as out, and we can trigger this with the button. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to just leave it now connected. It's not connected to anything, right? We are just connecting it right here, and I'm going to be pressing the button. I'm going to press it, and notice that the envelope is going to open like we play a key on our MIDI keyboard. It's going to let the sound pass, and as soon as I release it, the sound dies, just like when we play a keyboard, MIDI keyboard. So this in, trigger in, is going to tell the envelope generator how to open or how to close, or when to open and when to close. Now, remember what we discussed on the previous section. So this one, this synthesizer, it's using S triggers instead of an S trigger instead of V trigger. So what we do right here, when we press the button, this one is an S trigger instruction. So it kind of, it works because it's the same synthesizer. Now, the problem starts to appear, the problems are, will start to appear when you want to use an external synthesizer like this one, because this one is using V triggers instead of an S trigger. So if I want to kind of remove it like this, and I don't want to use MIDI, and I want to say, okay, so I want to trigger this envelope with an external synthesizer, and I'm going to be patching this to something external. If this is using V triggers, it will not know how to communicate properly with this one because they speak different things. This one is a V trigger and this one is an S trigger. And let me just bring the Crave and give you a practical example. Okay, so I have the Crave right here. Now the Crave is a different synthesizer from Behringer, and we have a sequencer on this one. So maybe what I want to do is that every time I create a sequence, or maybe, and this has an included keyboard, I'm just going to show you right now. Every time I play a key, I want to trigger that one somehow. And this one has a keyboard out right here, or a gate out. And I'm going to be connecting it right here. Maybe you can see that it says gate. So this means that every time I play a key, just like when we do it by MIDI, this is going to be using a gate, and this is a V trigger. So if I plug it right here, I'm going to be triggering my synthesizer on a different way. But notice that I'm not playing anything. But the envelope, it's open. And it's because, of course, this one is using a V and this is an S, so it's opening. And that is the main problem. Now, if I disconnect it, notice that this one, this synthesizer can, has different keys, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be connecting it again, and I'm going to be playing the keys. And I'm showing you this because, they don't fit on the camera at the same time. But every time I play a key, you're going to hear the noise. It's going to do the opposite of what we want. It's just going to close the envelope. So, okay, let me just show you. So I'm going to go right here and go to the trigger in. Now, every time I play a key, and yeah, I'm going to be playing it right now, it's going to close the envelope. So it's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to. And when I release the key, the envelope is closing. So again, it's just doing the opposite of what we want. And that's the problem when you use something that uses S triggers or V triggers into something that needs S triggers. Okay, so how can you fix this problem? Because it's a big problem. Now, of course, you could use just MIDI and forget about it. But if you must connect it and trigger this by using a different synthesizer, you are going to need a different module. You're going to need an extra module that will convert the V trigger to S triggers. Yeah, and if you're connecting this to the other one, it's just going to do the opposite, S to B, and so on and so on. But you need an extra module that will do that conversion before you can plug it in right here. There's no other way. And again, if you're thinking, oh my God, why? Well, this is, again, it's from 78. What do you expect? It's very old. And it's a very full recreation. So even you even get this. So yeah, you need a converter. That's it. And now the problem is that maybe it's something not so easy to get. There are many converters in the market, but it depends on the country where you live. If you live, of course, on Germany and United States or Canada, whatever it is that you live in those countries, for example, just to give you an example, you're going to be getting it. You can buy whatever you want. But if you live in a different country where there's no let's say, a culture about synthesizers and everything else, it's going to be something that you need to buy and get it from overseas. That's the problem. So if you must use a keyboard, and at some point, I guess you're going to be using a keyboard, you can use, in this case, I get the swing, I believe the swing from Behringer has this, and the key step, for example, has this as well. They have an output for gates. And on the configuration of the key step, in my case, you can convert it to S triggers directly. So now if I plug this, remember when I do a trigger in, I'm disabling the MIDI, and this is connected to my key step. And now my key step, it's using an S trigger. So now when I play a key, it's working. It's triggering the proper way. But I need to go to configuration and change my key step to use S instead of V. Now, of course, this in, it's going to be for this envelope generator. And I'm leaving the Crave because we're going to be doing a couple of things. I'm going to be showing you a couple of examples with the Crave. So again, we have the trigger for the envelope, this envelope. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to be connecting the EG1 trigger, and I'm going to be using the software, the SW out, which is, the button. So at some point, we want to run some modulation. So, okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab that envelope that we have, and we are going to be going from the out, and I'm going to be going to the cutoff, right? So now the whole point is that we are going to be triggering this envelope manually. That's, again, the whole point. So remember, I'm going to go right there. I'm going to do a little bit of cutting, and I'm going to enable this because that's where we are connecting this. So now if I play something, of course, nothing is going to happen. But it's, of course, because this is just super dark. We are cutting a lot of frequencies, and we are really high on the modulation. But notice that when I press the button, is opening. So we are just opening the envelope or triggering the envelope manually, right? So very simple. That's what the, this trigger in will do. Now, the fact that you're triggering right here doesn't mean that this is just not going to do its job. I'm going to play, and when I press the button, of course, we get a different instruction, and I'm going to press it now. So the envelope is still doing its job. Right? But now, of course, we are just kind of triggering manually whenever we want, and not when I play a key on my MIDI keyboard. Right. Now, of course, that's how it works. Now, then you have a different example. It's going to be a different out. It's going to be the trigger out, and this one is very simple. Instead of going trigger in and trigger manually, what it's doing right here is kind of outsourcing the trigger out. So every time that I play a key and we are triggering, this one is going to be doing the out. So maybe we can connect this to an external source, but remember, this is an S trigger. You're going to need to convert it first. Now, in this case, we could use it as an example. Maybe I'm going to go to the EG1, and every time we play a key, notice that this still works. Of course, we have a little bit of delay. Let me just disable. Notice that it's working. And when we plug something right here, we are pretty much disabling my MIDI keyboard from the trigger. But since this one, it's listening to my MIDI keyboard, it's exporting or just kind of sending a signal, the trigger, to the EG1, and it still works. Now, of course, this is like a dumb example because the EG1 already listens to my MIDI instructions. So we don't need to patch anything and it will work. But again, this is just the out of the first trigger in. All right, so I'm going to go back to something more normal. So we still need to cover a few more things. Now we need to cover the initial gain that we have right here. And then for the EG2 with the envelope generator number 2, notice that we don't have a main out like we do on the envelope generator right here. We don't have it, but we do have a rev out. And this one is going to be pretty much the same thing we get on the envelope generator number 1. It's just pretty much the same. But let's talk about the initial gain first. So this one, what it is, it's just volume. It's just pretty much volume. And it says, notice it says 0 volts, 2 plus 5 volts. The other ones will say -5 and so on and so on. But this one, it's going to be 0 plus 2 plus 5. So what we can do on this one, we can plug something and we can kind of go up in volume. This is just the volume. So I'm going to, or gain in this case. And I'm going to be plugging in my square or pulse And that is what this is doing. Now, the out of this one is a little bit different, and you can see it right there. Maybe if I unplug it, it's going to say to 0 and +5. So it's just going to go all the way up. If I go there, we get that, going from 0 all the way up. And if I go faster, we get it. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, so you're triggering. No, we are not. We are just going up and down in volume. If I move the envelope, if I do something with the envelope, notice that the envelope is not doing anything. And it's because the volume is just going up and down. That's all. If I play something, now the instruction is going to be changing because we have something playing in the background and we are using the envelopes. Right. So of course you can go like that, or maybe go the other way. But yeah, that's what you get. You go up and down in volume. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, so the pulse is a little bit too aggressive, and it is. It's just a little bit too aggressive. But then you have the other one, maybe the triangle. We could use that one and use kind of a tremolo, because at the end of the day, what we are doing is a tremolo effect. We go up and down in volume. Now, the tremolo, just to sound nice in my taste, it's just, it needs to be a little bit nicer and controlled. And we can achieve that by going to the external processor, but we're going to do that trick on the next section. I'm going to go to the initial gain, and you must be thinking, okay, so we are going to be going right here, and we are going to get that kind of a tremolo. But this one, the values are different, so it's going to be very mild. If I play a key, we can barely hear this. So that tremolo effect, we kind of lose it because the values are different. It's going to negatives as well. So we kind of lose that part. So, we just don't get it. Now, of course, behind the scenes, this is already doing it, but we cannot hear it when we play a key. Now, there's a way to fix this by going to the external processor and then going back to the initial gain. But I'm going to show you that example in a few minutes. Now, before we go to the next one, I want to talk about the rev out. And at this point, this should be very easy for you. So this one, it does the same that the envelope generator one when we use the rev out. It's just going to invert the instruction. So maybe on the cutoff, what we can do, we can just go and use the inverted version of the envelope. Right now, we are not using the inverted, we are using the normal. So if I play something, we just get nothing. But if I maybe go all the way down, if we go up on the modulation, we are just going to be using the inverted version. So nothing happens. So we need to change a little bit of what's going on right here because we are going backwards. So I'm going to go right here, provide a little bit of attack. I'm going to go down on the sustain. And now we can hear how it's working because it's going backwards. Right? Again, pretty simple at this point. This should be very easy for you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the default sound, and now we're going to talk about the next kind of a big thing, which is going to be a great part. Now let me go up on the sustain. So we need to talk about this four things that we get right here. So we need to talk about the converter, the envelope follower, and the three things, the converter, the envelope follower, and the trig out. Okay, so we know how the EXT, the external signal processor, works when we want to go down and we want to shape the signal with the low and the high cut, right? We already know and we kind of work with this. Now, if you follow the path, notice that at some point it's going to break right here, and at some point it's going to keep moving forward, and before it goes to the envelope follower, it goes to something that says FV converter, and then it says CV out from F to V. So what the F does that mean? So this means that whatever input or whatever signal that you're going to be using right there is going to convert the signal to voltage from audio to voltage. So, of course, when it's converted to voltage, you can just use the out, which is going to be the voltage out. It's going to be this out to some other source and do some kind of a modulation right there. And it's going to be using voltage instead of using, audio in this case. All right, so let me just give you a useful example. Let me just graph something right there. So I'm going to be using the crave. Now, the crave is going to be outputting the sound from this one, the VCA line. right? That's going to be my output. And if I go to the mixer and I do something on the crave, we should be able to listen whatever is the crave it's doing. So I'm going to go down on the oscillator so we can hear it when I play a key. Right now I'm opening the envelope. If I play something, we can hear it because I'm playing a key. So I'm opening the envelope so I don't have to do it from here. Right, so if I go to the crave, this one is doing nothing at all. So I'm going to go and record something. I'm going to do, I don't know, and I'm going to play something random. It doesn't matter, and you are going to see in a minute why it doesn't matter. Well, it will matter, but I'm just going to try to do something random. So in this case, I'm done recording something. If I play it, notice it's outputting something. If I get no volume, we are not able to listen to anything. And it's because, of course, we are not opening the envelope on this one. So if I press a key on my MIDI keyboard, because this synthesizer, the K2, is listening to opening the gate on demand of my MIDI keyboard, the key step. If I play a key, I'm going to be opening the gate, but we are not using any of the oscillators. So this is what the crave is doing. Right? And I'm doing something random. That's fine. Now, the main point that we want to do, right, what we want to do right here is that I want to use this sound, whatever we are doing right here, and use it to convert it to voltage and use it as a modulation source. But I don't want to listen what the crave is doing. I don't want to listen this one. I want to listen this one. So I'm going to go up in the oscillators. And now notice that we are getting a combination of this oscillators and of course, the crave, because we are going right here. And this, could be useful. But this is not what we want to do. What I want to do, I want to use whatever comes out of the crave as an instruction to modulate something. So I'm going to be patching this on the signal in right here. And I want to use that conversion from a signal, from audio to voltage. So if you go right here, this is the out of the amp. This one, remember, is going to be the out after filtering. And this one is going to be the conversion to volts. So I'm going to be plugging a cable right there. And now this one will output some voltage. So how can we use it? Well, this one's right here at the top will listen to voltage. So if I do something, if I play a key on my key step, we are listening to the oscillators. But right now, we have an instruction of voltage. And if I go up, notice that we get it. Notice it's moving behind the scenes. Now, of course, this goes through a full path. So whatever volume you're fitting to this is going to affect it. So I'm going to use the CV adjust. This one is going to bring me more of that modulation. And this is doing it behind the scenes. Let me go to a higher key. Since I'm doing low keys on this one, and then I'm doing high keys, of course the higher keys are just gonna trigger the modulation a little bit, I wouldn't say better, but it's just going a bit more aggressive. Right, so remember that the CV adjust works as an attenuator. If I go back, we get less of the modulation. Now, if I go right here and maybe go down and do a little bit of peak, we get something pretty cool, right? Right, so that's how you can use some other external source to convert it to voltage. And you could plug a guitar, you could plug whatever it is that you think, you want to use, and that is going to be converted. Used right here, just, output to whatever it is that you want to use and convert it to voltage. And you are going to need to use the CV adjust to, of course, adjust to modulation or just use it as an attenuator. Right, so on the crave, and for now I'm just going to disconnect it. And I'm going to show you what the crave sounds so you can have a very kind of a instruction of what this is doing. I'm going to be playing the crave and I'm going to go down on the volume so we can hear what the crave it's doing. So this is what the crave is doing. I'm doing a lot of cutoff. So let me just bring it down, bring this volume down. Right now I'm using the envelope mode of Crave. So we have an envelope. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to disable some steps. Let me just go there and just do it. Let me just go there. So now I'm going to be disabling some steps. So sometimes it's going to be triggering and sometimes it will not. So we have a different instruction right now. Now on this case, on the Crave, if I go to the other mode, which is the envelope on, or actually it's going to be the envelope off, what it's going to do, it's going to disable the envelope. So now the sound, it's going to be changing frequencies, still works the same, but the sound is constant. The notes are going to be a lot longer. This is how the Crave sounds right now. Now, of course, the sound, it's pretty constant, right? It's kind of a never going down. If I go to the other one, the sound is going to go up and down at some times, and you can see it on the spectrum, how the spectrum is moving. Sometimes it goes up and down. If I go to the other way, it's constant. It's never going up and down in volume. It's just going to the next frequency and playing it. And there's a difference. And I'm showing you this because we have the next kind of a big thing. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to use the same thing and go maybe to the cutoff right now. So we have the next big thing, which is going to be the envelope follower. Now notice that the envelope follower, in this case, let me just disconnect this from here. Notice it's going to follow right here, the signal. It's kind of a split it right there. It's going to go all the way here, and then it's going to reach the envelope follower. So what the envelope follower does, not this one, any envelope follower, it will listen to an audio source and it will create an envelope based on that source, based on that signal. And it's just an envelope generator. It's just going to create an envelope based on that signal. So now it's listening to the Crave, right? You know, just the sound that we just hear, that we just listened, and it's creating an envelope for that. Now remember, the envelope follower will listen to incoming signal. So if the signal it's kind of a super stable, the volume is never going up and down, the envelope follower will not be picking this up. So if I go to the envelope out and do the same trick we did before, I'm going to be playing something, I'm going to go up on the oscillators. Notice that we get it. And the envelope is just doing its job. It's doing the modulation right there. And we get some cool sound based on this one, on the Crave. But we are using the envelope mode. If I go to the other mode, notice that the envelope follower is really struggling into creating an envelope. Notice the red light is constant. It is because, of course, this one will never go up and down in volume. So the envelope follower is just triggering once whenever we play a key. It's struggling into creating an envelope. So you need a different sound source when you work with the envelope follower, something that goes up and down so you can trigger it. And right there, it's telling you, when it's triggering. And it sounds super cool. It sounds a little bit more precise than this one. For my taste in this case. Right. And it's because this one is an envelope. We are kind of using as an envelope, and we are not going super up in voltage and super down in voltage based on this instruction. Right. So, right now you just get two amazing things that you can patch to something else. You can kind of pair it with something else and get something super creative. Right. So the next thing is going to be the trigger. And I'm going to be kind of disconnecting this right here. And we know that how the trigger works right here. We're going to be triggering the envelope, or maybe we can use it as a clock to trigger sample and hold, or maybe just to trigger the envelope 1. So the last feature of the external signal processor is going to be the trigger out, right? So this one is going to be outputting voltage. This one is going to be outputting an envelope, and this one is just going to do a trigger. So if I use a trigger and just kind of plug it right there, I'm going to go to the trigger in, and notice that now my synthesizer is triggering every time, the K2 is triggering every time that is detecting an incoming signal right here. Now the signal right now is kind of a super loud. I'm going to go down. Now if we go down in volume, notice that the envelope follower, again, is struggling into getting that envelope, but the signal out is just kind of struggling a little bit more. So if the sound is too low, and I'm going to go low on the crave, and I'm going to go up a little bit up right here, the threshold level is going to help you to detect how you want to trigger out. So if the threshold is too low, it will not detect anything and it will not, trigger anything. So you need to find the sweet spot right here. I believe that's the sweet spot. And it will, of course, trigger your synthesizer. So if you're wondering, okay, how can I do if I don't have an I want to trigger the envelope or trigger the synthesizer with a different synth, and I don't have a converter and I don't have a key step, well, this could be a good solution. You just go through the external processor and you just get your signal, your trigger out. Right, pretty simple. Okay, so let's talk about almost the last thing that we are going to be covering on this one, and it's going to be the CV in for 1 and 2, and the CV in for the number 2. Of course, what you can do right here is you can connect something and manage the control voltage for the oscillators. So let's say that you have a sequencer, and that sequencer will output the control voltage. So you will plug it right here, and whatever you're doing on that sequencer will go and play, it will play the oscillators, right? You're going to get those frequencies, right? So, okay, so that's what it means. This is for both oscillators, and this is for just the second oscillator, right? So pretty simple. So we can patch a keyboard, something that emits voltage. And in this case, I'm going to use the crave just to show you how this works. We are going to run into a problem, but first I want to show you how the problem sounds like, and then I'm going to tell you the different solutions. So the crave has a CV out. Notice if I go right there, it's going to say keyboard CV. So everything I do on the sequencer is going to be going through that one, right? It's going to be outputted right here. So in theory, if I connect this to the 1 and 2, and I do a sequence or I play the keys on the crave, this will follow. All right, so I'm going to go right here and connect it to the 1 and 2. Now, of course, at some point, this needs to open the gate, but remember, we have that problem with the S triggers, so this gate will not trigger properly. So in this case, so we can kind of fake this, and I'm going to be connecting, maybe I'm going to use the purple one. I'm going to be opening the gate when the sequence starts. So I'm going to be using a fake trigger. I'm going to be triggering this with my hand, right? Pretty simple. All right, so I'm going to be I'm going to be pressing right here, the open trigger. I'm going to just open it. And I'm going to be playing some keys right here. And notice that we get nothing at all. Okay, that's odd. And if I go 1 octave up, we start to get something. That's weird. And if I go up, I'm starting to get something, but this doesn't work. And this means this red light, if you don't know the crave, is that I'm going up in octave. So I'm really up on the octave control. I'm really on the high keys. And notice if I go on semitones, it's just gonna sound weird. And if I keep going up, it just sounds super weird. So if I go right here, and maybe I create something like an arpeggio or something like that. Let me do something like that. I'm going to record it. I'm going to do a 1 3 5 5 1 3 5 5. So it's a minor arpeggio, right? Just a minor arpeggio. And I'm going to keep the envelope open with the button right here with the trigger. I'm going to get out of the rec and I'm going to do the play so we can hear that arpeggio. Of course, this doesn't sound like a minor arpeggio. It sounds like something else. Right, so it doesn't sound good, and it's because they work on a different way. So this is the problem. So remember that this was on 1978, and just like the K2 and the MS20, this one operates on hertz per volt. And today we mostly use volt per octave. So the crave, volt per octave, this one is hertz per volt. So we kind of have the same problem with the S trigger and the V trigger. So they're not able to communicate that well. That's why, we just don't get it. So that's the problem. This one it's hertz per volt, and the other one it's volt per octave. It's just a different thing. How can you fix this problem? Well, you're going to need to go through a converter, and that converter, of course, will convert the signal and do hertz per volt. That's one solution. The other one, maybe you just want to trigger something on the synthesizer with your sequencer. Well, instead of just doing it through here, why not just going through MIDI? If I disconnect this one right here, I'm just gonna disconnect it. Right there, it's gonna take me, there we go. It's just a little bit hard. I'm gonna go and connect the MIDI of the crave. So I'm going out of the crave. And now instead of just going through this connection, I'm gonna go and connect the MIDI in. And now whatever of course, the crave it's doing is this one is gonna follow. And I don't need to trigger the envelopes like this. And I don't need to do it like this. And now notice that the crave is on play. So if I stop it and play it again, that works. And kind of a problem fixed. You can use MIDI instead of using this method. That's, I wouldn't say it's a solution, but maybe you can get it to work that way if if you must. Right, so that's it. I'm back to the MIDI I had from before, but that's a solution. Use MIDI or use a converter module that converts the signal. And in the case if you have a key step, you can again just convert or change the configuration and change 2 volts per octave in 2 hertz per volt. And you can even, of course, do the S trigger like we did before. So I have it right here. So the orange one is going to be the trigger. So I'm going to be the trigger right there. And this one is going to be the control voltage. And now since the key step knows how to do both, because I've changed the configuration, every time I do a key, it's going to be working. Right? And in the case of the other one, again, you can go right here, and this one is going to be just doing it. It's just going to be doing it on the oscillator number 2, right? So that's it. Use it through MIDI. Maybe if you're using a keyboard, right here, there, you're going to need to change the configuration, like the key step, or you're going to need to go through a converter. Okay, so the last thing we need to discuss is going to be the signal out and the phones out. So the phones is very simple, right? It's just for your headphones. Nothing else, that's it. So then you get right here your signal out, right there. Can you see it? The signal out. So we've been using the VCA line from this one to go to the signal, to go to right here, the external signal in of the crate, right? So this is pretty much the same thing. It's going to be the line level out of the synthesizer. So you can go through other synthesizers. Maybe we can take the out from this one and go into here and then output from here, right? So you can do that one. So you can also feedback the signal and get a little bit of saturation. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go to signal out and we can go through the signal in. And then we are going to be taking it, and I'm going to go low in volume because this one is going to be feedbacking and it's going to be a little bit harsh to hear. I'm going to go out from there. And I'm going to go all the way to the external signal in. Now, the oscillators are all the way down, right? We are just not getting anything from the oscillators. I'm going to play something and notice that nothing happens. As soon as I go up, we're going to be starting to get some kind of a feedback. It's going to have a noise. And you can move the low cut frequency to adjust it or go up on the signal. It's just going to change it. Now, of course, this is not very pleasing. But the trick is that when we bring, of course, the oscillators, and I'm going to go down a little bit right now, since we are feedbacking, we are going to get is distortion and a lot of saturation. I'm going to bring the oscillators, and it is that we are feedbacking as I go more, we get it. I'm doing this. Let me bring it right there. Notice this changing. And if I do more, I'm changing this one. And there we go. And you need to play with these controls. It will give you a different vibe. Now, without doing this, it sounds less saturated. And now we get much more saturation. Now you get some kind of a modulation right there. So yeah, this is kind of one of the oldest tricks in the book that you get for this synthesizer. just, just a nice way to get a little bit more out of this. So let me just unplug everything. And guess what? We're done. We just covered every single thing. Oh, and one more thing. It's this one. It's the keyboard out. So since we are going through the synthesizer, when we get the CB, this one, of course, is going to be exporting. And this one works just like the one we did in Crave. We have the keyboard CB out, where we can connect it to a different synthesizer and just manage the CV of the oscillators. Well, this one is the same. But remember, this one works a little bit different, right? It works on hertz per volts. So it's going to be usable if you maybe have a different unit of this one, or maybe a different unit that uses the same thing. In this case, if I connect it right here, it's just not going to work. I'm going to need to go through a converter and then go through here. So, all right, so that's it. That's pretty much it. We just learned a lot, or actually all, the inputs and outputs from the patch bay. Now, this looks, once you learn the patch bay, it's super simple, right? It says, oh, okay, so it's a basic kind of a patch bay. We don't get a million things. And you don't. And that's, once you learn it and you get to know it, it's not so scary anymore. But this can get a lot of sounds, really crazy sounds, especially with the external signal processor. And you can find a lot of patches on the web just showing you a million connections and all the different sounds that you can get out of an MS20, or in this case, the K2 as well. You can reuse the same patches. If you find a patch for the MS20, it will work on this one. Of course, you need to adjust some of the values just to get it on the same spot, but the idea is the same. The patching works the same way. Okay, so this guide was never about showing you amazing patches. It's just showing you how this works and just to learn how each in and out works. And just, understand the synthesizer. That's all. Now, exploring the sounds is going to be completely up to you. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this one. Remember to like and subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, you can, of course, go at the description. You have links for PayPal, or you can go to Patreon and maybe be a 1 month patron and maybe, again, get me a coffee. And you're going to get some goodies in return, like presets and packs for other synthesizers. I'm going to maybe make one for this one. And of course, you also get some other things like videos, pre-release of videos, of course. All right, so see you on the next one.